Welcome back to another video. As you can tell from the length of it, this will have a lot of different training sessions in. I also got lazy with the captions, so you'll just have to look at the weights and assume what I was lifting, which you could always just assume less because I'm weak. But if you do look at any of the lifts and you do have a question of the weight, if you leave a timestamp, I can clarify it. But most of them are pretty routine weights, or at least weights that are pretty easy to tell for the most part, other than maybe the deadlifts when I was at the gym during one of the sessions. But overall, the week was really positive, and I kind of went off the rails when I got to Saturday. When I got to Saturday, I was feeling really good, which is a good thing, but decided just to see how heavy I could snatch, and did 120, missed it twice, made it on the third one, didn't film it because I just didn't hit the button or whatever on the camera properly, then tried 125 a couple times. And really, with all of the 120s, the only reason I kept trying 120 and 125 was that the bar was feeling light and it was feeling like it was possible to do. And I'm not saying that with like the mindset of like I could have definitely done it if I was just toughen up. Like it felt light. Like it felt like I could have snatched 130 based on how the bar was feeling in my hands with the hook grip. So it wasn't like I was doing a block snatch or doing a max with straps or something where it might feel better than it otherwise would have. It was feeling popping. The issue that I was having, and the mindset shift that you'll start to see, is that my left shoulder is just moving slower than my right one. Frankly, the mobility is less and the speed on it is less. So I was catching these, missing the lifts, but it was because my left shoulder just couldn't get back far enough relative to my right one. So I would have the weight locked out and it's just slightly forward. And once you're at maximal weights, that slight difference, you can't run out the weight every time, or at least if it's far enough out in front, it's just not going to be possible. So the epiphany that was kind of beat into my head after that Saturday session was not necessarily that I need to not lift heavy. It's that I just need to chill out on lifting heavy in the weightlifting movements until my shoulder is moving and grooving in precisely the way that I need it to be. And there's going to be a couple different ways that I assess this progress, because if you're trying to change anything, you have to have the ability to measure it and the ability to assess that measure. I'm not just going to look at a lift and say, it looks good, or think about how a lift feels and say, it felt good. That's important at times, but if you're looking to make more substantial changes, which in this case, trying to get my shoulder from what I can assess the percentage precisely. So if we look at what I did earlier in the summer, where I snatched 125, and we take that as a percentage of my lifetime max of 135, we can safely assume that my shoulder is at least at 93% potential. You could say a little bit more if my true max, this year is less than 135. I've only done 135 once from the floor with straps. So my true max could be a little bit less. I believe it's 132 without straps. So that's about 95%. So it's actually pretty accurate percentage. And it makes sense. That's that last little bit. And I think that will also help with jerks as well, because I have a similar thing where it's a little bit forward, a little bit easier to, kind of self-correct or kind of run out a jerk or whatever when it's a little bit forward. There's a little bit more margin of error than in the bottom of a snatch. But if I'm going to start pushing 130, 135, hopefully in excess of that, but as a minimum, getting back to what I would like to be able to do from the floor, at least 135 and maybe push to 140, I have to get my shoulder feeling at 100%, because the issue that I'm having now with it being how I think pretty accurately assessing is that it's at about 95% from where it can be, is that weights that are below that mark, that 95%, are possible. I can make them. Sometimes they feel good. Sometimes there's no issues with them, but it's at the heavier weights where the issues start to arise with the differences between the two shoulders. And so I'm trying to address that in, I think I kind of mentioned this, just lifting lighter, or maybe if I haven't, I'll just mention it again, but lifting lighter in the weightlifting movements until everything is feeling good. And the way that I'm going to assess if it's feeling good is pain tolerance, if there's any sort of mobility discomfort, because sometimes my shoulder will ache and sometimes it will be sore or whatever. and also assessing how mobile my left shoulder is on a consistent basis. So can I walk into the training session and immediately move into the position that I want to without having to mobilize the joint? Now, that's not something that is necessarily going to hold me back forever if it's not going to ever, be entirely perfect when I walk into a training session. I'm 31 years old, so there's probably going to be some sort of ache and pain when I'm walking into a training session. But what I'm more so looking at is that the left and the right side feel about the same when I'm going into a training session. There's not discomfort when I'm doing a behind the neck snatch grip press, or for short SGP, as I'll start to call them, because that's going to be an important movement that I do. So the way that I'm attacking this issue is through mobility work, trying to make sure that I do that every night, sometimes even during the day. There's opportunities while I'm teaching to where I can do basic shoulder stretches, and not that I'm not monitoring or not teaching at that time, but if I'm doing the structured warm-up that we have, if I'm in a doorway, or it's kind of a doorway, I'm in the gym still, but it's like the doorway, if you can imagine what I'm talking about, where I can stretch my shoulders and chest a little bit, and every little bit will help in that regard. But then at night before I go to bed, really massaging that area, stretching everywhere, not just my shoulders and upper body, but just stretching in general, and just trying to build as much mobility as I can. Not necessarily trying to recover it, but trying to get it back to where it is balanced with my right shoulder. Doing that along with training lighter in the weightlifting movements until the mobility is feeling better, until the tightness is not there, until it just feels like the right shoulder, I think will be the correct call, which means that weightlifting is not on the back burner, because the plan is to still do snatches and clean and jerks, because that's going to be the way that I assess progress, but to just keep them lighter. So for instance, the first session with this idea in my mind is that I worked up to 90 in the snatch. 90 felt good from a technique standpoint, but it was a little bit of discomfort in my left shoulder. So I stopped there, and that's a good number where if I'm doing a snatch and clean jerk day, that I am getting up to that weight, that I'm seeing how it feels, and if it feels good, if it feels fine, then I know that I can assess that weight is at least manageable for now, and then I can try to continue that session, or at least repeat it, or at least maybe move up a little bit, but just get to that same weight without any discomfort, and then assess how I felt moving up to that weight. So kind of trying to measure that pain tolerance, but also just how good the technique felt, how good it looked, how comfortable it felt, and just how everything was moving, grooving, and then also waiting until the next day and assessing how that 90 or 125 in the sense of the clean jerk, which I did on that first day, assessing how that made my shoulder feel. Did my shoulder get tighter? Did everything feel good? Just trying to simply assess it in a sense of how did the load feel on that particular day, and how did my body respond the next day. Now, the fun part of this kind of training right now is that the strength work, I don't have to do anything different with. My legs are doing good. My back is doing good. My legs are actually pretty strong right now. My back is really strong. I did 300, you saw at the end of the video, spoil it, but I posted it already, the 300 kilo deadlift. So strength wise, I'm Gucci right now. But the other thing I can do as well is really light shoulder work. So the snatch grip push press, or not push press, the snatch grip press, doing that with 40 kilos and just trying to do a lot of repetitions. Overhead press, trying to do a lot of repetitions, and not just for the sake of the bodybuilding aspect, that's a good important part, but also focusing on the mobility of those movements and trying to move them precisely. So for in the case of the snatch grip press, trying to make sure that's going in the correct position behind my head, that everything is feeling good. And I will say, from doing 90 yesterday and doing muscle snatch plus snatch grip press today, that joint is tight right now. It loosened up as I was using it, but I want to come into a training session with my joints not necessarily loose, but feeling good. I don't want to have to warm up for a shoulder joint to feel good. I want it to feel as good as my right one. So maybe not perfect, but kind of like how my quad tendons are now. It's not that my legs feel perfect, that I don't have any issues or any pain or anything like that, but both legs are pretty much the same as far as what what I feel with them. So there isn't extreme discomfort on one side or the other, because those imbalances create issues upstream and downstream with all the lifts, and then at a kind of a minimum, I'm just going to miss lifts, but as worse, you're building further imbalances. So just trying to address that with simple movements like that. So the first day of the idea, it's just snatch singles, clean jerk singles. So not a lot of volume, not a lot of weight, up to 90 in the snatch, up to 125 in the clean jerk, and then getting some volume in the back squat. So right now, at least tentatively, the idea is just to get some sets of 10 in the back squat, which will be good long term or short term, if I do it for a couple weeks or whatever, and then, build up with some reps with that. But really just try to build up the squat a little bit and kind of practice the front squats, because the next day was my Monday training session. After that, 3 sets of 10 I did at 120 the back squat, which felt really easy. It was kind of disconcerting. I was live streaming, so I wasn't listening to music, so I could just hear all my knees crackle and stuff, but they weren't hurting. It was just how they always sound, I suppose. I usually listen to music, so I don't get to listen to them, but I do remember them always being kind of crackly, but I usually have always listened to music, so having no sound in the shed and just the sound of me lifting does create a lot of extra noise that I don't typically hear with the joints cracking and stuff, which is a very interesting sensation, or at least a sound, I guess, because you don't really feel anything, but it's just kind of like, I'm going down in the squat and everything's going to crackle and whatever, and then I'm going to come back up and nothing feels weird, and it's a weird feeling, or at least a weird sound, I should say, because you don't really feel anything when you're doing the actual lift, which is good. But I'll be able to push the volume in the back squat a bit, practice doing heavy reps in the front squat. I'm not as concerned. So like the first day was just focused on practice snatch, practice clean jerk a little bit, get some volume in the back squat, and then be done. The second day, which will certainly not be the same as every day, because I know I'm not training tomorrow on Tuesday, I did muscle snatch plus snatch grip, press behind the neck or whatever, and then muscle clean plus overhead press. And both of those doing 40 and 50 with those respectively, and then just doing 1 plus 5 with the muscle snatch plus press, and then doing 1 plus 10 with the muscle clean plus press for 3 sets for both of them. So good amount of repetitions, but really focus on like 50 kilos in the press is not going to irritate any sort of joint that I have. It's just too light, but it's also good enough to create a stimulus. Like I was getting fatigued with it. I was getting not necessarily super close, but I was getting relatively close to failing at the end of a rep at the last 2 sets. But it's also like the mobility aspect. It's same with the snatch grip press. Like 40 is definitely a tougher weight, but it's a good weight to where I really have to focus on pressing correctly with it. And then essentially the front squats, I was like, I'm just going to go up to heavy, because I knew I was in training the next day, so I just basically maxed out. I got to did 165, then I missed 180, which looking at the video is definitely more of a strength thing than the bar slipping forward, but certainly doesn't help when that happens. But I probably wasn't going to be able to finish the lift anyway. Then decided to try 183, mostly because I just wanted to see what would happen. And so it kind of gave me a good assessment, because I did 175 on Friday, and that was pretty difficult lift, and then I missed 180 and 183. So I'm guessing my max right now is about 178, 177, 178, about there. So kind of the goal now is get the volume in the back squat, keep practicing in the front squat. So not necessarily max out like I did on today, but to have every other day where I'll also do pulls, but I kind of just maxed out my deadlift for the same reason I'm not training tomorrow. But the normal plan was to do snatch pulls and just do some sets of 5. So get some light weightlifting stuff in, get some pulls, do a heavy-ish front squat. If I can just do 170 every other day or 175 every other day, that will be good. And then especially if I'm increasing the intensity on the back squat sets, which I'm still planning at least for this week. That's kind of my idea, is to at least for this week do sets of 10 every other day in the back squat, and then everything else is just kind of gravy as far as pulls and whatever snatch work that I'm doing. So kind of a different mindset than I usually have, and I think long term will certainly be a good thing for me to do. I haven't been as consistent with the rower as doing cardio, but I'm still trying to linearly progress that. I'm just not doing it every single day. Speaking of like cardio movement in general, there's another thing that I'm kind of modifying with my days at school. So I wear a watch that measures my steps and stuff, and I don't really care necessarily how many steps that I get, but if I have, it's one thing if I'm going to peak, say in May, if I'm going to do that competition again, and I'm getting loaded up and getting peaked for that, I should guess is a better word or better term for that, then I can really manage the walking that I do at school and try to really minimize that as much as possible, because that is just fatigue that I have to deal with, and it's something that I want to make sure that it's not, I'm not walking 15,000 steps and then going to max out or whatever. So it's something to manage on normal training sessions. But because the focus now isn't so much of increasing the weight, but just doing volume, I can kind of manipulate how much work I do at school in a positive way as far as like how much movement, and just move more. And so not necessarily worry about limiting it, and not necessarily try to get more than I normally would, but I just can just be moving around the whole day, which, may result in me losing some weight. I don't think it necessarily will, because I'm still, strength training. So it's not as if I'm not training hard in general, which is something like mentally I think I kind of just always have to have. If I had all light training all the time, I would just get bored and not want to train, because I wouldn't feel it beneficial. But if I have like, all right, I got sets of 10, like it's not gonna feel necessarily heavy as far as the weight, but it's gonna be hard, and it's gonna be challenging to me. Then I got to have something that's challenging. I got to be pushed a little bit, and it's hard when it's not the weightlifting stuff, which I enjoy doing, but the strength stuff will be good to do for a bit until everything's Gucci. I hope that the process goes really quick. Maybe this is like 2 or 3 weeks, and then my shoulder is just finally recovered and everything's feeling good, because it really has gotten better over the months. So it's not as if it hasn't made progress. Like I said, I got up to 125 in the summer, and it was for a pretty good rep, and I don't believe any misses on that session. So it's not as if like if I peaked, I couldn't get up to that number, but I don't want to snatch 125. I want to snatch 130, 135, and 140. And I want to push lifetime PR. So I'm still not done pushing in that regard. So I have to take steps to make those changes imminent and make them possible. And one way is to build a base. So kind of what I'm doing here, sets 10 in the back squat. That's going to allow me to hopefully increase the amount of strength I have in general, but also give me a different focus other than doing heavier snatches and clean jerks, which are not really the best for necessarily improving in those lifts as far as the capacity that you're able to do. Obviously, if you want to peak and stuff, you have to max those out or go heavy on them. But if you're trying to increase the potential capacity that you have to make other changes, whether that's getting stronger or, in my case, improving mobility, because I don't necessarily think that, like, physically right now I couldn't snatch 130 or even more than that, but my upper body would just say no. As far as my pulling and squatting strength definitely would allow me to do more, and I also think it will help with cleans as well, because obviously the shoulder mobility will play a factor into that too. So there's a lot of things I think will be a positive with it. So I'm hoping, and I'm not trying to put a timetable on it, hoping that it's faster rather than slower. But then if I'm able to, say, do this in 3 weeks or whatever, then I'll be able to start progressing up the squats and start, really trying to think about the snatch and clean jerks and how I want to divvy those up during the week. But for now, it's really just going to be really simplistic training. I mean, I might have days where I use straps and stuff. There might be days where I don't, as far as snatch goes, but it really will be the only kind of minor thing. And this is a session that I did earlier today. It was actually really cold. It was like 55 degrees, which compared to what it has been is significantly colder. And it was not really too late. I actually got out there pretty soon, or pretty early relatively, but it definitely wasn't very warm out there. But actually doing all these reps warmed me up really fast, so I was able to take my hat and sweatshirt off for a little bit. So I was able to get warmed up pretty well. But I don't know, I'm happy with the session yesterday and the session today. Obviously, I kind of went bonkers with the front squat and the deadlift, and that won't be typical unless there's other days where I'm not able to train. But I don't know when the next conference day is. We have 4 total in the year, 3 in the fall and 1 in the spring. So I know there's 1 more that I'll have to contend with, but I don't imagine I'll go too crazy. Like, maybe I will. I always say that. I'll say it now, but then I'll get to a day like that where I'm not going to train tomorrow. Time to go crazy. But if I go crazy in a back squat or a front squat and a pull, then that's not going to be at the detriment to my shoulders. So I think if I am going to go, I don't want to say off program because it's not really like a hard set program, but if I am going to go crazy on a day, it's better in those lifts than the snatch and clean jerk, because it's just going to irritate the joint more. So trying to prevent the irritation from getting worse, increase the mobility, and assess that, and just see how it feels day to day. If I'm at 2 o'clock in the middle of a class, if I just stretch my arm up, is it tight? Does it feel bad? And just kind of assessing basic stuff like that. So trying to make the measures, because inherently it's subjective when I'm measuring the mobility, or I guess that is kind of objective when I'm measuring the level of the mobility. But if I'm measuring like how the shoulder feels when I raise it up and stretch it back and stuff, then that definitely is subjective. But the way that I can measure it in a more objective fashion is that I repeat the same weights with similar amounts of volume, and then I see how those weights make my shoulder feel, how my body responds to it the day after, because it's not really going to be a strong enough stimulus to like fatigue me or like be difficult enough where I'm going to be like really sore from doing it or whatever. 90 and 120 in the snatch and clean jerk isn't really going to wear me out. But if I'm doing those lifts and I'm noticing like, all right, I'm moving faster, it's feeling really good, I'm catching the bounce, my shoulder feels like it's just in the correct position on every rep that I do, then could try increasing, doing more singles there, increasing the weight, just seeing how that all feels. But just want to get the shoulder back to 100%, so then I can really start to push it. Because I honestly think it's not even weak right now. That's kind of the interesting thing as well, is I don't necessarily think that I haven't been approaching it correctly as far as like all the random overhead squats and stuff I've been throwing in. I think those are part of the reason why the snatches I tried the other day felt really good. I'm doing snatch pulls, I'm getting stronger, I'm doing overhead squats. I just literally can't get my shoulder to go into that correct position. And once it can, then like I'll be able to be much more consistent with 120. I'll be able to start doing 125 in normal training sessions, and then really start to be able to push up, hopefully even past that point. But you have to take the baby steps first and have to build it up, and going at it without trying to make those changes is just not going to net any sort of positive progress that I need. And really, I think I've done a good job this year. It hasn't been like insane. I haven't hit any lifetime PRs or anything other than I guess the deadlift, but I think I am more mature in the sense of how I'm thinking about training. I'm not just attacking it like a Neanderthal all the time. But there's the 300 on the deadlift. Haven't done that since actually when I did that 125 snatch in the summer. Back when I went to that other gym for one of the sessions, I did, I think, 125, 160, and then a 230 back squat and that 300 pull. So probably one of the best training sessions I've ever had as far as like a super total. I guess minus bench press, I didn't do it, but as far as doing those 4 lifts. But anywho, if you made it this far, I appreciate it, and listen to me ramble about my thoughts. And if you have any suggestions about anything or recommendations about the various things you think I should do or approaches I should take, I would appreciate that. And you throw it in the comments below. Mobility, I think I have a pretty good handle on. Programming, I generally have a pretty good handle on, but I'm always open to suggestions with stuff. That being said, I hope you all have a great day, and have a great one. Peace.